Hello again. This is Kathy Kuntz at Cool Choices, and I'm delighted you could join us today for our webinar about increasing participation in sustainability initiatives. Cool Choices, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, is a nonprofit that partners with businesses and local units of government to engage employees or citizens around sustainable practices as a way to accelerate sustainability efforts at the corporate or civic level. So the core of what we do is really about grabbing folks' attention and getting them engaged and involved and participating. And that means that a question that we field frequently from our partners or potential partners is about how to increase participation. Sustainability leads will talk about how they're just not getting people engaged. It's hard to get people to volunteer, or we're holding events and no one's showing up, or sometimes we're holding events and the same 4 people are the only ones who are ever showing up. How do we increase that? And sustainability teams can really sometimes feel a level of frustration about this. It's not uncommon for me in these conversations to have someone say, well, you know, you might get participation other places, but our people don't care. And they kind of paint this image of a cohort of folks who are completely apathetic about these issues, that aren't interested in saving money, that aren't interested in things that might improve their health and well-being, that don't care about the environment. And I can appreciate where that cynicism comes from when you're enthusiastic and passionate about sharing information about sustainable practices, and you have what feels like a cohort that's not responding to that. It can be really frustrating, and it can put you in a cynical place. When someone says to me, our people don't care, my response is always, they're probably more heroic than you think. That one of our challenges around sustainability, and I talk about this in another webinar, is how invisible it is. How sometimes people are doing any number of things to be more environmentally sustainable, and you just don't know because it's hard to catch them doing those things sometimes. But in general, I would assert, and do assert often, everyone, given equal options, is going to opt to do things that are good for them, that are good for their community. Part of the challenge is we don't always frame these things in a way that makes it easy for people to do the things that are best for us and the environment. But folks are more heroic than you think. The problem isn't that they don't care. The problem is the universe that they're functioning in. All of us, when I think about this, kind of live in the equivalent of a wind tunnel with multiple priorities hurling at us 24/7. So in addition to the things that you need to deal with at work every day, you've probably got all kinds of family commitments that might involve children, it might involve aging parents, there are community obligations, there's cleaning the kitchen, there's the obligations you have to a church or synagogue. There's all kinds of things that are competing for your attention 24/7. And part of what happens, because that's the world we live in and there's so much demanding our attention all the time, communications people use this phrase that I think is enormously helpful to think about. They talk about how we're all cognitive misers. So I'm really miserly about who I let have part of my brain space. And I think a nice analogy for this, especially the week of the eclipse, is it's like I've got these cognitive sunglasses. And essentially they let me filter out things that aren't going to fit in my brain. So given all the stuff I have to think about this week, my neighborhood association wants people to help organize around new playground equipment. I can't even hear that request. It deflects off my glasses and goes away. I won't even know that they're doing that. And it's a self-defense mechanism. There's only so many things that fit in my brain at once. So I've got these nice cognitive miser glasses that keep the amount of things coming in at a level I can manage, at a level I can function with. If I spent a bunch of time thinking about every single decision I made all day long, I would be paralyzed. I'd still be contemplating whether I was buying the right toothpaste this morning. You know, there's just too much out there for us to let in. So this is the challenge for you as a sustainability advocate. How do you make your message get through that cognitive miser filter? How do you get through to that space inside that target audience member's brain? And of course, what we all want to do there is we want to offer some kind of value. We want to offer something relevant that's going to bring them to the table and have them engaged with us. You know, we not only want them present, but we want them paying attention. And so really the first piece of this, and the most important piece when you're thinking about, okay, participation isn't where we want to be, the first thing to think about is what are we offering people? What's the value proposition for them? Why should they take a piece of their time and attention and devote it to us? Often when, and not always, but sometimes when we're talking to sustainability leads and they say, well, we can't get people to our events, they say, well, tell me about one of your events. Well, we had a meeting last week where we were reviewing our corporate sustainability goals and no one showed up for it. And, you know, when I hear that description of that, I think, well, so if this was a meeting about you describing your quarterly goals and how you accomplished them, how is that interesting to me? How is that valuable? How does that merit some of that space in my head? Unless I'm directly accountable for those goals too, that might not be relevant to me. So really thinking about how do you present something that's relevant and compelling to the audience you're trying to influence is a really important piece of this. So really thinking about what's that value proposition. And let me give you a tangible example here. One of our very first corporate partners was Myron Construction. Myron is a commercial construction company, family-owned here in Wisconsin, that survived the 2008 recession when commercial construction was dramatically down by pivoting to a commitment to green building. And so at a moment when typical construction had plummeted, their business was growing because they were building LEED certified buildings for people who wanted green buildings. When we met with Myron, they were really interested in engaging their employees and in creating more of a culture around the value of environmental sustainability, because they knew that would deliver to their clients and to their bottom line. We had a meeting, though, with Myron's entire staff where a vice president talked about why they were partnering with us at Cool Choices, and I thought he did this really effectively. So he started out by acknowledging how Myron's commitment to sustainability benefited their clients. He talked about the schools they were building that had more daylight, lower utility bills, and how the clients of Myron were thriving because of this commitment to sustainability. And then he acknowledged that there were corporate benefits to this, that the organization had turned a profit in difficult times because they were providing this premium product, that leadership of the organization benefited from delivering sustainable benefits to their clientele. And then he said, and that's why we brought Cool Choices to the table, because when we think about this, we see a piece missing, and we want you, our employees, to also feel personal benefits from the commitment to sustainability. We brought Cool Choices here to help you learn how to take advantage of these things in your personal life so that you are more effective at doing this in your professional life. And I thought he told this story in a way that really helped people see what was in it for them, that this was an opportunity for them voluntarily to do something that could deliver cash in their pockets, and that Myron had a reason for advocating that, but that it all fit into a story, and there was a very clear what's in it for me. And the kind of bottom line of this is about just under 70% of Myron's employees participated in this first initiative we did with them, and part of that included a number of employees who up front, staff at Myron said, well, they'll never participate. And I think the way that Corey framed this to folks was really influential in giving them a, oh, I can see what the value is to me, I see why this is relevant, I'll give this a try kind of thing. And certainly what we learned at Myron helped shape what we do more broadly in our engagement efforts. So we partner with businesses and communities and use an online platform where individuals can form teams with colleagues and earn points for their daily practices. Some of those are work-based practices, but a good chunk of them are personal practices. They earn points and they can win prizes. Ultimately, though, they're seeing personal benefits. So they're engaged with their work colleagues in conversations and celebrations around sustainable practices, but there's something in it for them as an individual. And that's a really important thing. So the first really important thing to think about in this is this, how do you deliver personal benefits? You know, for us, it's about making sustainability cool. How do you help people see the value in the proposition so that when they're paying attention to what you're promoting them to do, they're interested in doing that? Where's the value proposition in that? That's the first really important piece of this, I think. Then the next piece, of course, is really selling participation. And you know, we have a variety of on-demand webinars on our website, and we talk a lot about how important it is to make sustainability fun and social and visible so that people are really engaged around this. And you know, when you're once you've got that value proposition, think about how do you articulate that so that people are interested. Important piece of that is that folks just like them are benefiting from this. They could benefit too. So really thinking about how do you sell that participation in terms of the message. Then, of course, there's the delivery of the message. And when it comes to delivery, my strongest piece of advice is over promote. So if you think one email should be sufficient to motivate people to join an effort, send 4. As a rule, I think my own rule of thumb is whatever I think is sufficient, 4 times that is probably what's needed. Because, of course, I think people pay attention to the first email I send, but it might arrive at your desk the day that you've got a big report due, that your kid is sick, that your roof started leaking, and it's just not a thing you're going to see. So thinking about how do you do those multiple touch points. It's also really important to think about how you do those with as little friction as possible. And what I mean by that, my example would be, so when we're in some corporate settings, we use corporate email. So because if we deliver an email to a staff person and they can click on a link in that email and immediately join our program, that's pretty frictionless. There's not very many things that get in the way of them doing that. In other settings, we use posters or table tents, but really thinking about how do you make this as easy as possible for people to participate. If there are 3 hoops to participation, you're going to lose a ton of people at each of those hoops. So really thinking about how do you over-promote and make it as simple as possible. The final piece of promotion is leveraging word of mouth. And I think this is always a little bit challenging for us in the sustainability realm. The reality here is that in every organization, there are opinion leaders. And when I say opinion leaders, I'm talking about the folks that other people listen to at the coffee pot or in the lunchroom. I'm not talking about the people with fancy titles or corner offices, talking about the folks who exert real influence out there among employees, people who when they say something, a bunch of people have heard it within a day. And very often those folks aren't inherently on your green team, or they're not the folks responsible for sustainability. And I really challenge you to think about how you get them involved in these efforts. Because if you can upfront make them part of the conversation, if you can bring them into the discussion and ask them to help you recruit and promote engagement, you're going to get a lot further than you get otherwise. To give you a really tangible example of this from maybe one of my favorite examples. So this is Deputy Chief Aaron Lipsky of the Milwaukee Fire Department. He's a third-generation firefighter and maybe one of the most intimidating people I've ever met in my life, in the sense that it was really clear to me that Lipsky could do a lot of really cool things like run into burning buildings that I could not do. When he and I first met, he was looking for a way to engage firefighters around sustainable practices. The Milwaukee Fire Department's done a lot of things to make their equipment more efficient. They need frontline engagement in operating that equipment in an efficient way. As he and I talked, though, he had a lot of skepticism about our approach, you know, rooted in positive reinforcement and some fun. And I think the crux of what he said to me at one point during that was, Kathy, these are firefighters. If you talk to them about games and positive reinforcement, they'll just eat you alive. They'll just, that isn't going to work. And my response was, fair enough. Let's bring a group of these opinion leaders together and let me talk to them. Let's see what happens when we talk about the challenges of the department and how sustainable practices might influence that. And so Lipsky assembled a room of about a dozen firefighters, and it was a tough crowd. He didn't cut us any slack there. But as we talked to them, as they were presented with the idea that they were opinion leaders within this group and that they could, with us, collectively make a difference for the department, they very quickly became our allies. One of our triumphs from our program with the fire department is Chief Lipsky talking about how surprised he was at how easy it was to get people engaged. And really, I think that's not about us. That's about that group of opinion leaders he let us interact with and really their efforts. Because essentially, at the administrative level, Lipsky's team sent out emails saying, we're going to do this Cool Choices program, here's how you get involved. And at each fire station, when people went, what's this? There was an opinion leader who went, oh, I was in a meeting about that. This is what it is, and this is that we should join and we should do this because we could win and we could blah, blah, blah. And so there was that bottom-up engagement from people trusted that was way more influential than sort of an outsider influence someone like me can exert. So really thinking about how do you leverage those opinion leaders. That's not without challenge. People who are opinion leaders have opinions, kind of inherent. But when you engage them, that can be super powerful and it can take you a lot further in terms of participation. And it's part of the challenge that I think sustainability leaders need to come to terms with as they really think about how they grow participation, because that can really exponentially increase the level of engagement that's happening out there. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. We try to keep these short enough to engage your questions. So there is on the side panel there a little go-to webinar box that there's an orange button that if it's not open so you can see where to type a question, if you hit the orange button, it will open up and you can type in a question, and I'll address a few of those before we close. It looks like there's a question right now about how important is it to have participation from the top leadership to get other participation? It's a great question. So I could cite numerous examples of partnerships we've had where we had amazing participation at the top that really accelerated things throughout the organization. The one that stands out to me is Menasha Corporation. They're a packaging manufacturer with something like 40 locations in 14 states. And their entire C-suite participated in a program along with rank and file employees across the country, so 6,000 employees across the country. It matters to a factory worker in Philadelphia that they can see that the guy absolutely in charge at the top is also trying to do things to reduce his energy usage. That's a pretty powerful thing. It's pretty difficult to have something else be as powerful as that. That said, I don't believe that it's a death knell when you can't get that participation. I think sometimes you have to get what you can get for leadership and sort of grow that participation at higher echelons of leadership over time. Sometimes it's just where you start out in an organization that you can't get that off the bat. And so I think it's amazingly effective when you can have it, but I don't think so. It's not the end of the world if you can't get it, and sometimes you have to grow into it. Sometimes leaders follow before they lead, kind of thing, in some of these situations. So maybe a little bit of both. Okay, so thinking about the whole making participation relevant, what if that's not really on the table? So the example being a school district that needs to reduce electric usage in classrooms. That's just what needs to happen. How do you engage teachers if that's not the thing they're interested in? And I think sometimes in these cases you need to, as the sustainability folks, think a little bit creatively. So I would encourage you to think about, okay, if you're trying to affect teacher practices in those classrooms as part of your interactions with teachers, can you routinely offer one or two valuable tips that they could use at home? Some way to create a little bit more incentive for them to be participating in this. Again, I think it's really important for people to see how spending time on this benefits them. I mean, for teachers, you've got all kinds of pressure around test scores, you've got student behavioral issues they're dealing with. Thinking about how much electricity the computers in the back of the room are using is probably not high on their list. How do you create some way for participation to be more interesting? Of course, given the work we do, I think about competitions. Are there ways to incentivize or reward teachers who accomplish more? Can someone have a pizza party because their classroom did more to reduce usage than another classroom? The great thing about schools and motivating action there is small rewards can be enormously effective because resources tend to be so tight. So a pizza party can be a pretty magical thing. Or I've learned from our work there, letting someone have a pajama day, which is absolutely free, is a pretty powerful thing. So, thinking about how do you create some incentives and some value for those participants in this, as opposed to it really just being, you need to do more for us and pay attention to more things for some centralized goal that, again, just becomes one more thing that folks have to cope with. Oops, It looks like those are the questions we've got. So I think with that, I'm going to close. Again, my email is there if you want to contact me on our website. There are other webinars that you can access. We also will send folks a recording of this webinar in the next day or so. I think those typically go out. Thanks so much for joining us today, and good luck as you move forward and expand participation in your own sustainability initiatives. I wish you all the best as you do this important work. Thanks so much. Bye.